Alright guys, so here I am back again. This time I'm going to be building the Goblin. A couple things to remember when you build the Goblin is make sure if you're on a regulated device that it can handle the build that you make. And if you're on an unregulated device or a regulated device, make sure you're using the proper batteries. Alright, make sure you got them 30 or 35 amp batteries in there and it can just, handle your build that you're making. Alright, so I've already got one coil in there. I've used 28 gauge Kanthal 7 wraps, and I used it here on this this screwdriver. This screwdriver is just one I got from Fast Tech Atomizer. I don't remember which one, but it's kind of long, so I like to use it. So I make my 7 wraps, and then what I do is I push the coil up against here to get a little tighter. Now it's going to get a little tighter down there too when I bring it in and I adjust it. Keep in mind there are many ways to build this. This is just the way that I build. I'm shooting for around about a 0.5 ohm build on here, which is pretty much what I like to vape the Goblin at. Alright, so on the deck, like I said, I've already got one coil in there. Now this particular coil here, the Goblin, you typically want to try to do a center build so you can get your build over the air holes down there, which is right there. Kind of doing this upside down, so it's a little difficult, but you want to try to get your coil over that airflow hole. Now I'm not the best builder in the world, but the way I build it, it works for me. So when I built this one coil, I went in this hole here on this post, then I skipped a hole, and then I went into this hole here. So when I build it, get the juice off there. When I build it on this side here, I'm going to go in this center hole here and this hole here. And that'll help to help me kind of get the center build there a little bit. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and insert my second coil. I've got another coil made here just in case for some reason it snaps, because these screws are notorious for snapping. Just to get the one in here, it was snapping. So what I did is I took out all 4 screws, and I took a little sandpaper to the bottom of them and just kind of smoothed them out a little bit so they weren't so rough, because they put some rough screws in here. Or you can also swap, if you got one that keeps cutting your coil, you can swap it out with one of the extra screws that came in your baggie. Or if you have additional screws that will fit on here, like the grub screws or something like that, you can utilize those. So I'm going to go ahead and insert my coil. Like I said, I'm kind of doing this upside down. So let me try it sideways here. Alright, so I've got one in the end, and I'm going to insert this one right here. Now a lot of times when I insert that second coil, I kind of have issues because the very first coil on the back side here, it's usually in the way of that hole. So sometimes if you bend that lead up prior to inserting it, it'll help out and help you get around that coil there. Alright, so I'm going to bring this in like so. And I'm going to try to stay on camera here for you. Now you don't have a very big build deck, which is why I typically use 28 gauge. Some people use 26. You can do it if you're skilled, but I'm not that skilled of a builder, so I typically go with 28 gauge if it's kind of a small build deck there. Alright, so I got this one in. I want to make sure that it's tight. Now I'm going to bring that second one in. I'm going to make sure it's tight. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and trim my leads here. Now when you trim them, make sure that you trim it as close to the post as you possibly can. And when you trim the middle ones, of course you want to be careful when you trim these ones here, because you don't want to trim it to where you cut your coil. Alright, so I'm going to take a quick look. Now this coil here I've already fixed. This one here I'm gonna fix up. So what I do is I insert my screwdriver back in, and I utilize this part of it here, this plastic part, to help push the coil over some. Like so. And it's up a little high. Bring it down just a hair. Bring it down just a little more. Now take your time, you guys, when you do this. You know, do it safely. Make sure it's to your standard. Make sure it's safe. Make sure your coil is not touching any part of the post here, and make sure it's not touching the bottom of the deck. All right, because those are sure ways to get a short. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna remove this and put it on the mod. Now when I typically do my builds, when I first go to fire them, and it's just me, I like to put mine on a regulated device. That way it'll catch any shorts or just, you know, anything like that. I feel a little safer instead of just throwing it on an unregulated mod. And that's just a way that I do it. Alright, so I got it on. Let me back my camera out a little bit here too so you can kind of see what I'm doing. Alright, so I know the one coil in there works, so I'm going to go ahead and it's not going to fire evenly, of course. I got to fix up the other coil there a little bit, but they're going. And I'm pulsing it kind of low, so I'm just on 21 watts there, 3.3 volts, and the build is at a 0.5. Alright, as you can see, there's at a 0.6. No, it's a 0.5. It might be kind of hard to see that. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tweezers here, make sure they got the coating there, and I'm going to fix the one coil up a little bit. So I'm going to fire it a few times, and then I'm just going to go in and squeeze. Hopefully you guys can kind of see. Just kind of squeeze there. You fire and then squeeze. So I want as close as I can together. And then what I typically do is on my very last squeeze there, I'll kind of squeeze it together, and then I'll just fire it. That helps it kind of stay in place. So there it is, guys. It's not the best build, but it will work. I'm not touching the post, and I'm not touching the bottom of the deck there with my coils. I'm still at a 0.5. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and blow on it a little bit, and I'm going to insert some cotton. And there's different ways different methods that people, you know, they kind of roll cotton. I don't really roll it, but I don't know. You can always experiment with this stuff, you know. Kind of do what suits you. So I'm going to stick it in. I'm on the back coil here first, and I'm just going to pull it through. And I'm going to make a cut. Now the first cut I make is against the deck, and it's at an angle. So I'll bring my scissors to the deck, and I'll cut at an angle. Alright, same thing on this side here. On the deck, at an angle. Alright, so there's the first coil. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to do the same thing to the second one. And I'm just going to stick it on through there. Plug it on through. Now your cotton, you don't want it, you know, too tight. You don't want it too loose. Cut at an angle. And I'm going to cut at an angle. Alright, then what I typically do is I take a smaller pair of scissors and then I go in there and I make a second cut that's just a little bit past the deck. And I do that one at an angle as well. And this is just kind of trimming everything up is what I'm doing here. And the beauty about this is if you ever go too short, you just wick it again and do it again. At this point here, what I like to do is I like to that's kind of what it's looking like there. At this point, what I like to do is I like to juice up the coils just a little bit so it's a little easier for me to work with the cotton there. Because this one here I like to put into the channels, because those are some pretty good sized juice channels. Now what I do is with the end, because remember I cut it at an angle, is the long end, what I'll do is I will tuck it into the channel. Now when you tuck it into the channel, you want to make sure that you don't have any of it on the on your threads. And I'm going to do each one like that. This one here obviously is going to be a little long. So you can always go through and cut it, because you don't want it to the bottom of the channel. Alright, that's what you don't want. Because then your juice is probably going to have some issues. You're probably going to have some issues with your juice getting up in there. And I just keep going around. I keep doing it. You see, it's in the channel, but it's not all the way down. Alright, then what I'll do is I'll take the bottom part of the chimney here and I will fit it on. Those are my cats. They're up wrestling. And it should go down pretty easy, guys. Now sometimes you gotta reverse it to find the threads on this thing. But it should go down pretty easily. Okay, once it's at the bottom there, you can go in and you can double check. Which is what I do. I make sure my coils aren't hitting the sides or nothing like that. And you can also make sure that your cotton didn't get all messed up or anything like that. And so what I like to do is I like to take a pick and just kind of go down by the coil and make sure that it's not rubbing the sides. Because if it's touching the sides, you're probably going to get a short. Alright, so now I'm going to put on my top chimney here. Make sure that goes down. Now I'm going to take it off the mod. I'm going to go ahead and slide on this piece here, just bottom, make sure it's O-ring up, and that just screws on like so. And then your tank, and then your top portion here, which you want the O-ring down. So you want to make sure that's sitting really good. If I didn't mention it, guys, this does have you can adjust that a little bit. I wouldn't adjust that a whole lot because that screw, it gets it's not a really thick screw, it's just kind of thick at the top and then it gets thinner as it comes out more. So, you know, just be careful. It does protrude a little bit, but you know, use common sense on the mod that you're going to use it on. All right, so let me grab a drip tip real quick for this. I'm just going to use a stainless steel one, and I haven't had any issues with the drip tips fitting on here. Let me go ahead and unscrew the bottom. The screw is kind of in there. It's in there kind of tight. There's no O-ring on this screw either. Double check, make sure it's still tight. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and unicorn bottles will come in real handy with this, but my bottle here's got like the little top thing on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill it up with juice, and I'm going to fill it up to the top just to where the liquid first disappears. So I've found when these things leak, it's usually out of the drip tip. Now if you use these in your mod and you have it against the top of the mod, there's usually some condensation that you get. I don't think it's juice, I think it's condensation. But I don't know, I'm not positive. It doesn't really bother me any, I just, you know, wipe it every now and then if it happens to do that. Let me tighten this down. Now I've got a few, looks like a couple of drops are coming out of the top there. Guys, this is a really tight screw. Let me wipe that top off real quick. Alright, so there it is. See a few bubbles. There's a bubble there. When I do that, I usually give it a couple of dry pulls. Alright, so I'm going to go back up top and vape on it real quick. Alright guys, I'm back up top with the Goblin here. You can see it's still kind of wicking there. So we go ahead and give it a quick vape. Alright, she's vaping good and wicking. So that was just a really quick build, guys, on how I do my Goblin. One of the things I do is after I have vaped the first tank, I'll take it apart and I will recheck the wicking, because sometimes after you've vaped it for a bit, the cotton likes to go down a little bit more into them juice channels. So what I do is I check that, and if I find that it's gone down more than what I wanted it to go down, I'll go through and I'll just kind of clip it and then put everything back together and vape it. So there it is, guys. These are the Goblin build. This one here was from fasttech.com. It was $11.43. And that's all I got for you. There you go. Just keep your builds safe and do some good vaping. Thank you very much for watching my review.